True crime.
Killer cases.
This is Murder Monday.
It's supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. Many young couples use that time after college and before they start their career to explore, to do something before real life arrives, when they're no longer able to do the fun stuff because of responsibility. This was a dream for Peter Falconio and his girlfriend Joanne Lees. The dream? Backpack across the world. To go on an adventure across the world. And started dating in 1996 in England. Then in 2000, they set off for the adventure of a lifetime, backpacking across parts of the world. They left for Nepal in November of 2000, soon visiting Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia. And then in January of 2001, they arrived in Sydney, Australia. It seemed like a good spot for Peter and Joanne to hang out for a while and live. Joanne worked at a bookstore, and Peter worked at a company that made furniture. They made friends, but after 6 months of living in Sydney, they decided it was time to move on and continue their adventure. So they headed for the Australian outback, the vast, remote interior of Australia. It's a barren but beautiful place that's known for being hot, desolate, and dangerous. It was July 14th, 2001. Peter and Joanne were driving along the Stewart Highway heading north from Alice Springs, a remote desert town. It's known for having unprecedented level of violence. The couple was headed in their vehicle to a place called Devil's Marbles. They'd stopped at the Tie Tree Roadhouse, where Peter took the wheel. After departing from that rest stop, they noticed a white truck was following quite closely behind them. Thinking that they'd shortly be overtaken, they kept driving, and soon the car drew up alongside them. The driver was yelling and gesturing frantically towards the back of Peter and Joanne's van. The couple figured there was something wrong. Worried, Peter pulled over to the side of the road. The driver of the other vehicle got out, telling Peter that there were sparks shooting from the back of his vehicle. Two men made their way to the back. Joanne climbed into the driver's seat. She was told to rev the engine as soon as the two gave the signal, so they could determine the cause of the sparks. They gave the signal. And then it happened. Joanne was in shock. Moments later, brandishing a gun, the man pushed his way into the vehicle through the driver's side, pushing Joanne onto the passenger side. He tied her hands behind her back, but she was able to stop him from zip-tying her feet and duct-taping her mouth. The man lifted Joanne and threw her into his utility vehicle. The killer turned around and headed back towards their van. Joanne was able to slither through a hole in the vehicle's canopy, while she watched the man drag her boyfriend's body from behind the van. During the next few hours, Joanne hid in the brush of the outback, using lip balm to get free from the zip ties which bound her arms. Hours later, she was able to flag down a truck driver. When police arrived to the scene, they found a dirt-covered pool of blood, and the van that Peter and Joanne had been driving 80 to 100 feet away. In the following days and weeks, police spoke to Joanne, but there seemed to be inconsistencies in Joanne's story. Her recollection of the killer's face, the breed of the dog that the killer had in the vehicle. She was even inconsistent about the type of vehicle it was. In total, 12 apparent inconsistencies. And then they found out something else. While in Sydney, Joanne had an affair. Were these really inconsistencies? Or did something more sinister occur in the Australian outback? We'll find out next on Murder Monday. A young couple, Peter Falconio and Joanne Lees, head out on a backpacking venture in November of 2000, exploring parts of Asia, ending up in Australia where they settled for 6 months before heading north into the desolate Australian outback. Between locations, they were flagged down by a concerned motorist who says that they had sparks coming from the back of their vehicle. Concerned, the couple pulls over, And while Joanne tests the engine, suddenly, the other motorist murders her boyfriend. Without reason. The killer zip ties Joanne and throws her into his vehicle, but she's somehow able to escape and find help from a passing truck driver a few hours later. Police return to the scene and discover a pool of blood in the ditched vehicle, but no signs of Peter's body. And 3 weeks later, police are worried about 12 apparent inconsistencies in the account of Joanne Lees. She goes through multiple days of intense interrogation. Was Joanne's story all a lie? Police decide to revisit the crime scene, only then finding zip ties and lip balm, proving that Joanne wasn't lying. Police release a sketch and then security footage of a potential suspect with a vehicle very similar to the one Joanne was thrown into. It was a needle in a haystack. But there were leads. And finally, a break. A name. Bradley Murdoch. A career criminal and drug runner that had a vehicle that matched the killer's. But that's not enough. And Murdoch said no to any police interrogation, lineup, anything like that. So they got creative. Police found out that Murdoch had an estranged brother. But of course, since they're brothers, they have very similar DNA. So hesitantly, police contacted the brother of Bradley Murdoch, who agreed to share his DNA. Police ran that blood against blood that was found on Joanne's clothes from the night of the murder. And unequivocally, it was determined that the blood on Joanne's shirt was from someone in the Murdoch family. It wasn't until a detective with an acute attention to detail noticed something while going through thousands of Murdoch's belongings. They found a small, round hair tie wrapped around his holster. A hair tie that once belonged to Joanne Lees. And months later, when it was presented in evidence, Murdoch actually recoiled and wouldn't touch it. That moment right there was the nail in the coffin. It's now 18 years later, and Peter Falconio's body has still not been discovered. But in 2005, Bradley Murdoch was found guilty and sentenced to 28 years to life for his murder.